But I have, in as much as possible, since I found these things out, I have tried to come out and get myself out from under this debt bondage, because that is what it is. It's like you're in a spider web and you can't get out, and the spider's coming towards you. So this is something that we should have been striving to get out of. The word mortgage means death contract. Mort is where we get the word mortuary, mortality, these types of things. Mort means death, gage means contract, death contract. So when you sign a mortgage, you're in a death contract. Okay, so again, the borrower is slave to the lender. The Bible says to owe no man anything. Okay, for these but to love them, So again, there's just not a lot of biblical precedent for getting in debt. There is none, actually. A new stage has been reached in the economic crisis, which has moved far beyond the situation that existed even 3 weeks ago, when the Bush administration announced its bailout plan for the banks and insisted it was the only way to avert a market meltdown and severe recession. This is one of the reasons I didn't do this study right away, because I wanted to really see what is going to be the fruits of this wonderful economic bailout plan. Well, now we're seeing nothing has changed. In fact, it's got even worse. And yet they were making all these guarantees, this is going to make all the difference in the world, and it was all lies. Okay, so that's one of the reasons I waited to do this, because I really wanted to see, you remember that lie that they told us back then? Oh yeah, well, hasn't changed anything. If anything, they're saying it was the only way to avert a market meltdown and severe recession. Well, that's accelerated as far as I can see. That supposed panacea, designed to cover the losses of the biggest banks and facilitate a further consolidation of financial power in their hands, has done nothing to stem the crisis, nor could it, since it did not address the underlying rot in the industrial base of the American capitalism. Now the crisis is rapidly engulfing the broader economy, heralding a wave of plant closures, cutbacks in every branch of economic life. President Bush made another White House appearance Friday morning in a futile attempt to revive confidence in financial markets, aside from making clear that his administration has decided to begin buying equity stakes. And I don't mean like steaks like filet mignon or, Delmonico or any of those. No, these are equity stakes, S-T-A-K-E-S. So his administration has decided to begin buying equity stakes in order to inject more capital into U.S. banks. He had nothing to add to his previous remarks on the crisis. Well, we've had a privately owned banking system in America for a long time. I mean, interlinked with the government. It's called the Federal Reserve. And they're linked up with the U.S. Treasury. They print our money, and there's nothing backing the money. There's no gold or silver backing the money at all. It hasn't been for a long time, since the 60s. So again, that's a whole other rabbit trail I'm not even going to go down. But President Bush, declared that the federal government has a comprehensive strategy to resolve the crisis without explaining the abject failure of the previous strategy. It's as though we've already forgotten about the abject failure of the $700 billion bailout that they were threatening these congressmen with martial law if they didn't pass. Bush has come to symbolize the disarray not only in financial markets but also at the highest levels of government. Even as he spoke, the Dow began falling. That's how much confidence, the financial sector has in him. So even as he spoke, the Dow began falling and was down more than 300 points minutes after he finished speaking. Summing up the prevailing attitude toward Bush and other political leaders, Howard Silverblatt, senior index analyst at Standard & Poor's, said, quote, "People are scared. Nobody believes what is coming out of the mouth of politicians or chief executives." End of quote. Now, there's that old expression, how do you know a politician's lying? If his lips are moving. Okay, and that's about as bad as it's become. Okay, seriously, I mean, it's about that bad, particularly at the upper levels. You know they're lying to you. Just understand that the fodder that's put on the mass media, that's controlled by the Illuminati elite, by the whatever you want to call them, New World Order boys, it's purely for our benefit to placate and to brainwash the masses. Okay, so please don't believe everything you're seeing on TV. All the proposals to deal with the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, whether from the Bush administration and the Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. or the governments of Europe and Asia, have one thing in common. They all proceed from the need to maintain and defend the interests of the financial aristocracy. Oh, we've got to protect them. We got to protect the rich because they need to keep getting richer. And us sheeple people, we need to just be dumbed down and do what we need to. We just need to obey. That's essentially their only interest is in defending the financial aristocracy. None of the measures address the social tsunami that is about to engulf the working class. As for the multimillionaires and billionaires who monopolize the economy and dominate the U.S. government, they will remain as ruthlessly preoccupied with their personal enrichment as ever. As the New York Times reported on Friday, a sticking point in the government plan to purchase stock from the banks with taxpayer money is the existence of token provisions in the bailout imposing certain limitations on the pay of top executives. Oh, we can't have that. We can't have certain limitations on the pay of top executives. The Times wrote, quote, "It is not clear," administration officials said, "that the largest American banks would agree to this, particularly given the restrictions on executive pay." As though we should be worrying about these devils at the top of the banking scheme, that they make sure they get paid, as though they're not already rich enough, and as though they're not the ones that have orchestrated this whole thing. The events of Friday, accumulating 2 weeks of mounting financial crisis and a flurry of measures by governments to prop up their banking systems at public expense, confront the working people of the world with the prospect of a rapidly rising unemployment, poverty, and social misery. This next article is entitled Potential Economic Seizure Dead Ahead. This is from the market-ticker.denninger, D-E-N-I-N-G-E-R.net. Oh, and I should have said before, I'm going to have just about every single one of these articles in a PDF format with this teaching. So you can go up and you can click into them, and sometimes there's links that you can click into and you can explore further. And if you want to read the full articles from all these, you can click on the PDF. I'll either have the whole article up there or the actual link to go to it. So this is from Carl Denninger of the market ticker .denninger.net. He entitles this is now a national emergency. This was posted 2 days ago, October 9th, 2008. $7 trillion of wealth has vaporized in U.S. stocks in the last 7 days alone. $7 trillion in wealth? I talked to one of my mom's friends, and she said that her mom had stocks, and she said that they're going there as soon as possible to cash in the stocks because they've lost $100,000 in value. $100,000. And I don't know if it was in the last week or two, but it was in that time range, 1 or 2 or 3 weeks. A lot of people's wealth, I really believe that God is permitting this to happen too. I really do. Because people have put in their faith and their hope and their trust in their wealth. And I believe what's going to happen is the Lord's going to take a lot of that away. And He is going to test us. I believe the time of testing is truly upon the United States. Now, there's a lot of other countries, they've been tested. They have been being tested. If you're a Christian in China, or in India, or in Africa, where you might face death every day, God bless you. I don't feel like I'm worthy to carry your shoes. I really don't, because I don't know what that's like. Now, I may, very shortly, and I'm not praying that it happens, but, I think it's a matter of time before this stuff starts to go down here, is the point. So $7 trillion of wealth has been vaporized in U.S. stocks in the last 7 days alone, with 5 of it since the passage of that ill-designed and foolhardy bailout bill. The sell-off this afternoon is the real deal. It was not caused by the stock market getting mad. It was caused by the short-term credit market, along with the treasury market suddenly dislocating in a few minutes before the bond pit closed at 2 p.m. Now, this is a real insider type of guy, so he writes in a way that, I don't understand every single term he's using, but I just wanted to touch on some of his points here. He says worse is the fact that the institutional lending has essentially disappeared, both between the banks and is now choking off commercial short-term credit across the board. Well, again, this whole bank lending thing, it's not biblical, it's not godly. Okay, and when you start to put your trust in